Hey everyone, Tactics here. By popular demand, we've got part 2 of my hardest boss guides for Season 3 of Dragonflight, where I take a look at some bosses that people have been struggling with and give you some tips and tricks to get them down. And of course, I had to one-up the first part, so that means we're going to be covering 6 bosses in this video. If you want to check out that part 1 or my hardest trash pulls guide, where I do a similar thing for some of the scarier trash areas of Dungeons in Season 3. Those are both over on my channel or linked down in the description below. Otherwise, let's not waste any more time here and hop right into Throne of the Tides, where we're going to look at the final boss, Ozumat. So, for this boss here, you're going to see right off the bat here, I'm going to be a little bit leading my group. We've got the group over there. I'm a little bit ahead, and that's because we want to be separate. I want to give them space away from the frontal so that they don't even need to think about that, and that's going to be a common theme. So I'm going to lead my group a bit here, and the rest of the group is relatively together here, and they're going to drop their blotting barrages just slightly overlapping, but not that they're both in each other's circles. And then again, I'm in front here. They have a lot of safe space, and now the two cleansing flux debuff players are going to go stand on those puddles. Now, some things to note here: you are immune to the puddle damage when you have cleansing flux, so you don't need to worry, you don't need to rush whatsoever. Stand on those puddles and wait for them to entirely disappear. That's one of the biggest mistakes people make, is they leave a little circle up left of the old puddle. They'll walk away from it, cleansing flux will expire, and now you still have 30 seconds before the next one. So that puddle that was really small, that you left barely any of, has 30 seconds to expand and be really big and take up a lot of space. So it's really important that you eat all of the available puddles whenever you get the cleansing flux debuff. And this is where the dance kind of starts here. So again, the rest of the party is going to stay together. I am going to come in together here. The ads are spawning. We're going to group up all the ads in one spot. Note that the sludges do spawn more of those puddles, so I'm going to try and kill all these sludges as close together as possible. Boom, the sludges. I'm going to drag this last living sludge a little bit closer to drop all those things around, and I'm going to rotate like 180 degrees here around the boss, because again, a frontal is coming up, and I don't want them to think about it. So they're going to do their loose little spread right beside the previous puddles that were made by the ads. I'm going to shoot the cone over here. Everyone's going to have a lot of space available. Look how much space they have, right? Make a little triangle formation, and then it's really easy. Cleansing flux will come out, and they'll clear all this stuff pretty quickly. And again, they have plenty of space here on either side of me to be for the frontal cone without even being near, like actually in the area. And then again, I'm going to move back now. The cleansing flux is done. I have a lot of time before the next cone. I want to move back and group up all these ads towards the rest of my party here. So I'm going to rotate around right on top of the melee here. And again, kill these sludges all in one spot. And we're doing the same thing. I'm going to rotate around the boss again, 180 degrees-ish. And now the party is going to group up around these already existing puddles. And it's pretty easy to deal with here. Oh, of course, yes, I forgot this happened. There was a big rescue. I guess we can see what happens now if bad stuff happens. So we do a bit of a weird spread there because of that. And you can see we have sludge all over the place. But it is still possible for the cleansing flux to clear this. So that's what you have to do. If you ever get in this bad situation, the cleansing flux players here went in opposite directions around the boss. They can both be clearing this sludge as it appears. As it appears, boom, wait for it to be gone, then move to the next one. And you can see he already moved to the spot over here. And again, I'm just going to move back to my group here, pick up these ads, and have them all grouped up right on top of the melee here. And again, same, just rinse and repeat. It's just a bit of a dance here for your tank. For the rest of the party, you're just kind of staying together as much as possible. Now, let's move on here to Everbloom. I'm going to cover another Everbloom boss here, this time Ancient Protectors. Now, that LOS strategy was, of course, hotfixed. So instead here, I'm going to show off like the kind of nuke strategy where we're going to pop Bloodlust and all cooldowns on pull. And the priority is to kill Earthshaper Telu just on pull initially, because as soon as you kill one of the casters, just the overall party damage is significantly decreased, and it really becomes like significantly less scary for everyone in the party. So as soon as you kill one of the casters, it's just a lot easier, and so that's the goal of the strategy. Nuke Earthshaper Telu. Of course, cleave isn't even, so there is some kind of speed lost by doing this strategy, but it's way safer. So big thing here, kicks. Toxic Bloom you saw was 100% kicked. You also need to make sure you're saving a kick for Life Warden Gola. Revitalize will get cast a little bit after the finish of this channel. So you make sure, usually a range kick available. I think we have our Boomkin save their beam kick for when that Revitalize goes off, because usually Revitalize will go off or begin casting, sorry, before you've killed Earthshaper Telu, even with Lust and all cooldowns. So make sure you have a range kick ready to get that boss. Also, the tank can get that kick too. You can see I'm going to lean over towards there. I'm not going to get it, but I'm going to be ready to get it if it need be. And these Nature's Wrath kicks is really, we're not super high prioritizing them. We'll get a few spare ones, but again, the priority is Toxic Bloom and Revitalize. You're going to hope that, CDs, maybe you can use AoE defensive cooldowns early on to kind of last you through this higher damage part in Bloodlust, with the healer getting some HPS boost from that as well. And you are hoping to kill Earthshaper Telu relatively quickly, so you don't need to sustain that kind of defensiveness. So Noxus Charge, guys. I saw some confusion about this ability too. This circle goes around the tank, but when the actual charge goes out in 0.2 seconds, it's going to spawn a swirly on every single player, including the tank, but also every other player. So you can see here, our melee have moved away from the boss here, so that you don't just drop these swirlies directly underneath the boss. You want to make sure you are dropping these in good places, you're not cutting people off, and you are leaving safe space around the casters here. Boom, it goes off. Boom, swirlies around every single player. And there's still a safe little column here between the two caster bosses, because of course the casters can't move. So you really want to make sure melee are getting off the bosses when the charge goes out. Next one's going to go out, and the Revitalize comes out shortly after. So I charge over here, but there it is. Our range gets it. And then I'm going to go back to Earthshaper here just to get some cleave on the big guy while we are still finishing off the Earthshaper here. Notably, again, casts are going off from Gola now because Earthshaper's channeling. So you want to be aware, because this is like the scariest part of the fight, because Bloodlust has started to fade. And so this is where you want to make sure that you are using defensives until Earthshaper is dead. But you're going to see here, once we do actually get Earthshaper dead, and again, backing up, still room in melee there to kill. And we're going to move over to the other boss as soon as Earthshaper is dead. And from here, you can just kind of cleave them relatively evenly. It's not a big deal. But just look at like the party health now, right? We're basically dealing with just the channel here. And then as soon as the channel ends, the Life Warden will just do their spam cast, I believe. And that's it, though. There's no extra channeling damage while the spam casting is going out. There's no spam casting while the other boss is channeling, right? It's all just individual, and it's just so much safer. Like, you can just let these kicks go off. One kick goes off, boom, it's like 30%, but there's not really other damage going out. So as long as there's not back-to-back casts going out on the same player, it's really not a big deal whatsoever. And this fight just gets way safer once you actually get to this point. Because I believe the boss just never channels again. When there's only one alive, they just do the water bolts. One thing, just careful not to make this boss charge out of the boss arena. But other than that, once you've killed the Earth boss, it becomes so much easier. And just a note, the reason we kill the Earth boss first is because initially on pull, the Earth Warden guy is the one casting spells while Life Warden is channeling. Obviously, they're both going to be casting spells at some point. They rotate, but initially the Earth one is casting, and so that's why we start on the Earth one, so you can reduce some of that extra damage intake on pull right away. Now, let's move on. That is Ancient Protectors. Let's go to the Time Lost Battlefield. So, on pull here, you're going to see us move towards the edge of the platform, and the reason for that is to reduce the damage the boss does from Warcry. So for those that don't know, basically, Warcry is a stacking buff the boss gains, which on their autos deals party damage, and they get this by killing your allied characters with their abilities. So that's the Blade Storm, and that's the Shockwave. If they kill those characters, they gain a stack, and on their next auto, they deal raid damage. That's how it works. And so the goal here is to make as few of these guys die with the abilities as possible. And so by taking the boss slightly towards the edge and having your party on the edge here, you can bait the Shockwave attacks off the edge. This was a mistake by me. It can also target the tank, as you can tell. So I should have been rotated over slightly on top of my group as well. Maybe this hits like someone over there, just because he does hit one guy over here. It's not the worst, but it's not ideal. But this is where I would want it to have been on the first one, just to make sure the shockwaves are all off the edge there. And you can see again, they're rotating back and forth. Basically, you ping pong back and forth. And now he's going to melee and do some party damage. But if he had done that through the center of the map for whatever reason, right? If you hadn't baited it this way, and he gains like 5 stacks, like 6 stacks, he's going party damage, right? Just all back to back, and that is not good for your healer. They will not be happy about that. So this drastically reduces the party damage by fighting the boss in this way. And Blade Storm is similar, right? Kite along the edge of the room here, away from the mobs, and you see he's not getting any stacks from that. I think he killed one guy again right at the end, but much less than if you had just ran like a madman through the room here. Blade Storm kills like 3-4 mobs, and you're going to deal with a lot of party damage at the end. So something to keep in mind for both of those abilities. The next big thing to deal with is the adds, and the important thing here is to stop the bleeding adds. It's either the axe throwers or the archers. They're going to be the highest priority, and they also don't move. So boom, they come out. Note that the add spawns here prioritize one of each type. So one melee guy, one spellcaster, one ranged guy. If you've AoE'd too much, because all these adds are hittable even before they've been summoned, you can get into situations where not one of each is available because they're dead, so it'll spawn 2 of one type, and that can be very scary if you spawn 2 archers. So try not to over AoE these mobs too much. You can see obviously it helps a little bit, like this Conjurer spawns at less than half HP, the archer spawns a little lower, etc. That's from the passive AoEing again, but you don't want to overdo it because getting 2 archers, as an example, is real bad. Their bleeds are super scary. Speaking of their bleed, it's stoppable, as you can see there. Our Evoker goes out and stops the bleed cast. That's going to be very good. Every ad spawn have someone ready to stop the ad cast and another player ready to interrupt the caster, just so you can group them all up very easily. Again, you'll usually want to group them on top of the archer itself, wherever that is. So that means the tank is going to be away for the shockwave bait usually, but you know, it is what it is. Obviously, we are getting around that by having a DK grip in the archer every time, and then the mob will just get kicked in, which is nice. If you don't have a DK though, you will have to move those ads on top of the archer mob itself, and again, kill the archer ASAP. Otherwise, not really a big deal. I think the caster mobs have like a magic debuff they can put out. So, you know, dispel that if it goes out. But usually, you know, it will not be a big deal. And it most time won't go out. Other than that, big defensive from the tank. Mortal Strikes is 2 hits. It's 2 big hits here with that massive healing reduction. So make sure you have something available. Otherwise, again, this is going to be 4 here. A bit of a unlucky kite along the edge. You can see how much damage we're taking just from that, right? It drops us down on a 21 down to like around 50% health. So, you know, keep that in mind on higher keys. This is going to get very scary. So it's more important to bait well along the edge on those higher tyrannical keys. From there, we move on to one of the scariest tank bosses of this patch, and that is Oakheart. Of course, for some reason, all trees are exceptionally dangerous. I think that's been true all expansion in Dragonflight, but for this boss, the big thing here is making sure you have a way to get out of the Nightmare Breath, unless you're a Blood DK, because, you know, just Death Strike Lamau. But for every other tank spec, it is very important that you avoid the Breath, because you want to be stacking defensive CDs to get you through the grip. So as a warrior, as a Vengeance Demon Hunter, you can leap every single time and get out of it. Boom, easy. Prop Paladins, you can steed, that is enough speed, and they can do something similar to Bears. Bears, it's a bit spooky. I think Bears is the spookiest tank for this boss to get out of the breath. What you need to do is you actually just spec into Feline Swiftness in your talent tree. So there's a speed build kind of going around back in last season a little bit that I played around with. That is going to be the play for this dungeon, because Feline Swiftness plus a little bit of early cheating strafing is going to allow you to dodge that Nightmare Breath every time, and it can be even easier every other time with 1 minute Stampeding Roar. So Bears, it's a little bit more finicky than the other tanks. You'll notice basically the boss will do a plant a little bit before the Nightmare Breath comes out, so you can start moving like 1.5 seconds early on the Nightmare Breath cast and strafing backwards, and the boss won't follow you and then cast the Nightmare Breath, and you'll have a 1.5 second head start. And that means any tank can just strafe out of it without any additional speed boost. But obviously, again, it's risky to do that. So the only tank that has to do that is Guardian Druid. So keep that in mind. Monks, of course, have roll. And like I said, Blood DKs don't really need to get out of this, because you can just sit there and Death Strike with the boss. And yeah, Blood DKs they're a bit of a unique case. But otherwise, you want to be able to stack your defensive CDs up on the grip here, because this grip deals a ton of damage. It's exceptionally scary, and usually you'll need to overlap multiple different CDs. You know, absorbs are really nice. The Farok trinket is insane. There's the leap, me dodging it there. The Farok trinket is insane for this. If you have the tank Farok trinket on any difficulty, it doesn't quite solo, but it almost solos with a Farok trinket plus something else small. Can be very good, and that can be in the rotation quite often because it's a 1.5 CD, right? So it's very, very good. It's like every third grip, basically. You can cover with the Frog Trinket and some other small CD, which is nice. Of course, it's magic damage. The grip, it sounds like it's going to be a scary physical hit. It's magic. Keep that in mind. So things like Spell Reflect do apply a DR to it. Things like AMS do absorb a large portion of it. So important to note those things. But it's all about layering your defensives, just like the Jade Temple third boss was all about layering your defensive CDs. This is that kind of boss here for this season. But again, the most important thing, not needing to use defensive CDs on the breath. Obviously, if you hit by accident, you need to commit something there. But ideally, avoid as many as possible. And of course, this is before considering healer externals as well. So healer externals can be thrown into the mix here to help. Other than that, for the party, the main source of damage is going to be from this Shattered Earth cast. On higher Tyrannical keys, you will need to personal every single one of these or have some kind of raid CD running, an Augavoker CDing for you, that kind of thing, right? So that's something for Shattered Earth. The other thing are these roots. So these Strangling Roots here, they are basically clearable by any kind of root cleanse. So things like Blessing of Freedom, things like Tiger's Lust, you can stand in it, you can avatar as a warrior, for example. Things like Soulburn from Warlocks, right? Something like Freedom and Soulburn will let you collect a lot of them, but things like Tiger's Lust, things like Avatar can only clear an individual one. So what you can do to get around that is you can actually have your party, who are the non-tank players, of course, because the tank's pointing the frontal way, you can have them stack up as these roots are player baited. So if everyone is stacked up in one spot, it'll spawn all the roots in that one spot, and you can use just one clear really to get rid of all of them. It's very, very nice. So that is something to keep in mind. But other than that, I mean, this is really just all about making sure that your tank survives that Crushing Grip cast. Rotate through your defensive CDs. Again, if you're someone like a Prot Warrior, for example, you want to be stacking things. I can Spell Reflect every single time, but you want to make sure you are adding other things on top of that Spell Reflect, spamming Ignore Pain, making sure your tier set DR is procced and good. You can rotate through Demo Shout, rotate through Shield Wall, things like that, right, to just help you get through it. And you're going to see that here, just basically spamming Ignore Pain while I'm in this the grip here. As it eats through that Ignore Pain shield, I build up another one, and basically, every single tank has ways to live through that combo there, but that's the big thing. Live through that grip. Now, let's move on to the final boss of this dungeon, Xavius, because this is another tough one on Tyrannical. Now, the real hard part of this boss comes in phase 2, of course, but let's just quickly go through phase 1. The big thing is just positioning here. We want to make sure we have rooms, for melee to have uptime, whether they have the Nightmare Bolt here where they need to stack with their friends, or they have the Growing Paranoia where they need to be away from their friends. So you can see here the ranged is relatively close to the boss here, and there's plenty of space now. I think if you fast forward a bit, we'll have there's a melee Growing Paranoia right here, a full range stack with other people right over there as well. So plenty of space here for melee to have uptime, whether they have either of the debuffs. Basically, that's the big thing here. That is essentially phase 1. It gets a lot more complicated in phase 2. So the big thing here, Apocalyptic Nightmare, make sure you pop a defensive for this. We popped Zephyr there. That's enough on this key level. Depending on key level, the higher you go, the more you need to commit to this. You basically want to commit the bare minimum in terms of cooldowns here. This is a really, really good spot for AoE cooldowns, right? Like Zephyr, like Rally, those kinds of things. Really good spot for them here. I believe I did Rally as well. Yeah, Rally is running, so that's a good spot to use them there. But usually you want to try and save personals for this final phase, and the reason for that is the damage amp the boss can get. So basically, every time the boss eats a swirly, he will gain a stacking 5% damage amp capped at 10 here. The problem is, eating a swirly is kind of relative because the swirlies are much bigger than they seem. Basically, you add an extra 2 yards to the edge of the swirly, and that's the actual area where the boss will gain a stack. You'll see this probably in the clip at some point. But notice here, we're not getting a ton of spawns near us, and that is somewhat lucky, but also somewhat on purpose. Basically, these swirlies here are spawned in a mixture of random positionings and player-baited positionings. So what we do in this phase is we make sure our ranged are no longer directly under the boss, but a little bit away from the boss, just to make sure any swirlies that are baited on ranged players are not under the boss and difficult to get the boss out of, right? Melee, of course, you have no choice. You're going to be close to the boss. It is what it is. But by having your ranged players take a few steps back away from the boss, It gives you the potential to avoid more swirlies and just have less damage amps on the boss. We're gonna get more closer. Like there's one on melee, there's one right under the boss, and there's that damage amp starting out. Got a third stack actually. I need to see this. Basically, again, the swirlies are much bigger than they seem, and of course, you cannot move the boss during feed on the weak. So that is just, he's stuck there, nothing you can do. Look at his positioning here, he's going to gain a stack from that one for some reason. It is what it is. One key here also, we are towards an edge of the room. You see basically some of the spawns are like in the wall here, super easy to avoid, and that's why I prefer kind of this area of the edge of the room. There's also a spot in like the cubby where the boss starts as well that a lot of people tank in. But you can see here, just having some lucky random spawns and having a couple baited on the ranged instead of the melee lets us reset this damage amp stacks. And that's the key here. Anytime you're able to reset is huge. Make sure, again, I had to move there. If I didn't move this boss, he would have gotten a stack from that swirly here. So keep that in mind. This one right here, he's going to gain a stack from there. I have to inch him a couple steps in the other direction just to make sure that they don't get stacks here. He's going to get one from there, for example. It is what it is. But you can see here, once players have to kind of split up a bit, and especially if you have less melee, it can be a bit problematic to get these silent zones in a good spot. So just try and be aware of that. Sometimes a range may need to come in to deal with that kind of thing. It is what it is. Do your best to try and move the boss. And again, being near an edge, having range go out and bait those swirlies a little bit away, not super far out. Like you don't need to be super like this far away even really. You can be a little closer than that. Just as long as your swirlies aren't big enough to hit the boss, that's a good spot to be. So maybe just even like just a little over 10 yards away from the boss is all you really need it to be. And of course, as you'd expect, that damage amp on higher Tyrant, if it goes all the way up to 10 and you keep getting the refresh, it's super scary. Right? The Nightmare Bolts will deal a ton of damage. The feed on the weak is just going to absolutely nuke people if you don't have like an immunity to get rid of it. Notably, of course, combat drops work as well, right? Vanish, Feign, Meld can stop those entirely if you have them available. Really, really important to wait on phase 2 to use those abilities. Do not waste them in phase 1, and hopefully that will help you get this guy down, because again, here he is at the end, stacking all the way up to 7. Super spooky at this point, so you want to make sure you try and avoid that ever happening. Now, let's get into our final boss of this video, and that is the Blight of Galakrond. And basically, the name of the game here is kind of controlling the passes of that corruption. The big thing that does damage is the actual passing itself. Of course, they do ticking damage as well, but the scariest part is just the passing. In particular, in phase 2, when you have a debuff out at the same time as the winds. And now this is going to happen just like I just mentioned on Xavius. You want to save those Shadow Meld, combat drops, Vanish, Feign Death, all that stuff for that second phase on Xavius. Same deal on Blight of Galakrond. You want to save those combat drops as they can prevent the corruption from going out. You want to save them for the dragon phase from 80% to 50%, because that's the scariest moment if they ever overlap with the winds. Now, going through it here in terms of pass timings, for phase 1 from 100 to 80%, you can instantly pass to your tank here, because the Blight Reclamation, you can see it's going to come out very, very quickly. So we just pass as soon as possible. I believe he's going to like blink on top of me here in a second. Pass it, and then he's gone, and I just point this off into the wall. Gets eaten. Easy. Notably as well, on the phase transition, so at 80%, not 50%, it'll just eat the debuff entirely, so you don't need to actually clear them if it's near the boss transitioning. Here is not too close, so again, we're just going to move over towards the mage. Boom. Done. And this last one, I assume, is probably going to just get held by someone, because the boss is going to transition here. Yeah, it's going to go out, and he's going to get it, and the phase transition, so it's gone. That's phase 1, just insta pass to your tank. Phase 2, the ideal here is you want to pass a couple seconds into the wind start, and that gets you away with passing a single time. So basically what's going to happen here is going to go out, and again, this is where you would do combat drops to try and prevent this cast from going out. If it's targeting you, this is the primo phase for it. And a couple seconds into the Necrotic Winds cast is when you would want the tank and the debuff player to come together. So the big thing here, create space for them. Let them have space. You can see there's no one between me and the corrupted player. There's a couple players over here. The melee's playing over here. And that means that no one's going to accidentally get this debuff as we swap during the winds. I actually swap about a second, maybe even 2 seconds a little early here. It gets very, very close, as you're going to see, but it's still fine. So you can actually let that go an extra second than I did it. And on top of that, that is the single best defensive a player can pop. If you are the player that gets the first corrosion, or a corrosion on the start of P2 here, you want to pop a defensive such that it's covering the couple ticks of the winds you take while you also have the corrosion dot. That is like your best defensive. And then you see here, basically the winds are going to end. I'm going to be holding it and have that pass during the winds, so I'm not really in danger. And then this breath is going to go out and take my debuff. Again, we cut it close on this one. The next one is actually the perfect timing, I think. So again, corrosion is going to go out in a couple seconds here. You had a combat drop and targeting you. You could use it. I don't think he had Vanish available, but you're going to see here, he's going to hold it. Winds is going to start. There they are. I'm going to wait a couple seconds. I'm going to take it from him during the winds. And now it's going to be, I'm going to have like 2-3 seconds on the end of mine by the time the cast actually finishes. So plenty of time here, right? Like, boom. More than that. I'm going to have like 4 seconds. And then it's going to eat me up. So that's kind of the timing play for P2 on when to pass it. P3 is kind of the Wild West. You have to pass that dot forever. You just want to try and prioritize passing it to your tank because, of course, again, the scary part is that initial tick. There's not a ton of external damage going out in this phase, so it's not a huge deal. But in general, it's just easier to have your tankiest player, which is your tank, holding that debuff for as much as possible. I do recommend lusting actually in that previous phase if you want to get rid of the most dangerous phase quickly as possible. If you want to maximize damage, of course you'd lust in this phase, but I think the lust is more valuable in that second phase that we just did there. We basically would have probably avoided an entire cast of a corrosion if we had lusted there. So definitely valuable to lust in that second phase. Just initially grouping them up. I think the really only thing in this phase is the Necrofrost. Any movement clears can prevent that from going out. So for example here, I'm going to freedom the Necrofrost target, and it instantly breaks it. And it just means that, you know, it's one less thing that you need to actually swap to and worry about. So you gain a bunch of boss damage by using those clears on that instead of damaging them until dead. Other than that, the only thing to really keep in mind is that the Blight Breath, the boss, Dazak, which is not tankable, will run towards a player. And so you don't want to be too far from the boss here. So you can see he's going to run, but it's going to be very close. Boom. Easy like that. We baited it really, really close. So the boss doesn't run too far, and that is it. So hopefully this guide helps you out, guys. 6 more super hard bosses in Dragonflight Season 3. If it helped you, please leave a like and subscribe for more content like it, including coming very, very soon, 0.1% title level key route walkthroughs to just show you some strategies used in high keys with more coordinated groups. Of course, you can check out part 1 and the trash video down in the description or over on my channel. As usual, I need to give a massive thank you to all my subscribers over on Patreon. I really do appreciate the support. Otherwise, thanks everyone so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.